Hello, it's Jeff Fromenchuk again. Um, Back in the mid 1990s, I did my master's research on the autism etiologies as an information mapping problem. It was for an information sciences master's degree. I checked the research abstract for causes of autism under investigation from 1943 through 1996. Some on my committee didn't want me to use the word problem in the title, but I won that argument, and I think the 20 plus years since have supported problem as the right word to use at the time and still even now. Um, to make a long story short, um, here's what I found. My wife and I are working on 1997 up to the present now, but this is what I found for the span from 1943, when autism was first used in the research, to the end of 1996. I found 1,259 articles that mentioned autism and named a cause, or causes I should say, because there were 1,543 etiologies named in these first 1,259 articles over the first 50 plus years of autism cause research. And this is the same info as is on the pie chart that you just saw, the total number and percentage table. And again, this is for 1943 through 1996. And I had to limit myself to these 6 causes, though in truth, it was a bigger sea of causes than even this. Besides the 4 causal categories found early in the literature review, environmental, genetic, neurological, and psychological, 2 other categories emerged during the data collection and analysis: allergy autoimmunological malfunctions and biological influences. That is, a lack or abundance of some chemical, vitamin, or amino acid present in autistic individuals. Um, an immune system weakness often manifests itself as an environmental causation, such as in utero exposure to rubella, ingesting lead, or adversely reacting to antibiotics during the toddler years. However, the abstracts are more likely to pair immune system weaknesses with allergies than with environmental factors. Similarly, the biological impacts become evident through brain chemistry unique to autism. Therefore, they tend to be covered as neurological etiologies in the research. Most of the causes labeled environmental are in fact related to complications surrounding the pregnancy. Purely environmental causations, such as a chemical factory or a nuclear power plant in the autistic individual's hometown, have started to be investigated only since the 1970s. However, 8 of the 1,543 causes clearly single out allergic insults, independent of environmental causation, as triggering autism. 96 causes are specifically attributed to autoimmune system deficiencies. 38 of the 103 biological causes asserted are neurobiological, and so they counted under both causes. Only 47 of the articles, such as those that specifically address body chemistry imbalances in the brain, like an excess of the chemical serotonin, are recorded as solely biological causes. The remaining 18 etiologies are paired with other causations. Realistically, there could have been more than these 6 causations. However, I limited the study to these 2 additions to the 4 apparent from the literature review, since the lines of distinction among the sources blur as their numbers increase. When other causations investigations were identified, these were mapped to the 6 using the correlations you see here on the slide. Part of what prompted this etiology research was something I started to notice in the mid-1990s, but I'm seeing even more now: the widening range of what is being called autism, or autistic spectrum disorder. When our son Luke was diagnosed in 1989, 1990, autism in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, it was 3 at that time, was covered under pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. That's what he was diagnosed with. If PDD-NOS sounds like a catch-all phrase, it is. The DSM of mental disorders keeps expanding the autism spectrum based on the number and severity of the traits exhibited. The other thing happening is what Charles Hart noted in his Parent's Guide to Autism. There's no stigma about autism now, unlike how it was in the 1970s. As he put it, there's no life sentence. It's not the cancer of developmental disabilities anymore, as Hart put it. What Kathy and I have seen is that in the 1980s, autism and mental retardation swapped places in the diagnoses. While MR declined, autism exploded. Then mentally retarded became the diagnosis no parent wanted to hear, while autism became almost cool. As far as what was happening in school systems in the U.S. and elsewhere, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act didn't even recognize autism in Congress's first authorization, which was in 1975. Autism became a recognized disability with the first reauthorization of IDEA, but not until 1980. Since then, autism publicity and freer labeling have led to a growth in the range of what is being called autism, from people who need help doing about every life skill to people who aren't any weirder than I am. Seriously, though, there is an autoimmune component contributing to the growth of autism diagnoses in recent years, meaning contamination in the air can impact people who are susceptible. Brain chemistry malfunctions are real and true for everybody. This is the reason our individual diets matter. How the body and brain process what is taken in may not work as well for kids who end up diagnosed with autism. And there is probably a genetic component. Since both of our kids were diagnosed, my wife and I watch out for this etiology and have volunteered for a lot of the studies. When Luke was diagnosed, autism was given at 1 in 2,500 births. But even then, there was a 1 in 50 chance for a couple who have an autistic child already to have another. I almost don't want to point out that the 1 in 50 is pretty close to what the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are saying about the overall autism prevalence right now, 1 in 54. There is a genetic component, of course, as identical twins tend to both have autism, though in different degrees. And 3 times as many boys as girls are diagnosed with ASD. But that's changing now too, as girls get diagnosed more. However, it is still diagnosed behaviorally, not by medical testing, and that's the other reason for the growth in autism's prevalence. The total percentage for each causation within each country is based on the overall numbers of causes for that country. However, the percentages in the bottom row on this slide are from the number of causes for each of these 5 countries divided by 1,543, the number of etiologies for all countries. Or to put that another way, the percentages in the columns across all 6 etiologies come out to about 100% for each country. But the totals row gives how many causes altogether each of these countries had, and what that percentage is for the top 5 countries in the total that comes out to the 1,543 causes that I found. Psychological percentage surprised me. It was named in autism causation research 366 times between 1943 and 1996, second only to the neurological etiology. And as you will see on the bi-decade breakout coming up, Bruno Bettelheim and refrigerator mother causation disappeared from U.S. research and thinking by the early 70s. But in other countries, even developed countries like France, where it is better than 43% of the etiology research, and the United Kingdom, where it was almost 25% for the early years, and it's still being investigated. To be fair, though, psychological now is more likely to mean investigating the ways autism manifests itself in social impairment, not so much implicating poor parenting or directly saying those with autism are psychologically impaired as well. All right, next let's talk about autism causes by all countries. Um, one table is in rank order and one in alphabetical order to make it easier for you to find the countries of interest to you. Um, of the observations that jump out, let me say it's no surprise that the U.S. is first, especially because I limited myself to abstracts in English, but I did wait an extra year for the translations, and these are usually done within 6 months of publication. Translations of the abstracts, at least, if not the whole article. Um, the other thing going on here is that article publication places are given as each country of the UK, but also sometimes just UK. This isn't usually true for the countries of the former Soviet Union. Um, then there is the other geopolitical stuff I had to track for the years concerned, like the reunification of Germany and the splitting of North and South Korea, etc. All right, this one is just an alphabetical layout of the same by country info that was on the previous slide. Now, by decade, the psychological causation was first proposed in 1943 with neurological investigations coming soon after. A possible environmental causation first appeared in 1949, while genetic or biological causations were not initially proposed in the research until 1953, 10 years in. Allergy immunological is the newest research tact, first mentioned in 1965. However, psychological causation research accounts for more than half of the pre-1970 writings, with neurological causations appearing about half as frequently, and the other four causations each in single-digit percentages in the early years. In the thesis itself, I say more about the issue of whether an improved understanding of genetics and brain mechanisms contributed to the increase in research into these causations and the declining percentage of the psychological etiologies being investigated. Two articles appeared in 1943, both attributing autism to psychological maladjustments. One of these is Connor's Autistic Disturbances of Affective Contact, the seminal article describing autism as a new form of emotional disorder present from birth. Prior to 1943, autism received passing mention as a substrate of schizophrenia. From 1943 through 1956, 31 more autism causation articles were published. 22 of these attributed autism to psychological disturbances. 4 proposed a neurological causation. Only one author investigated a genetic cause, while 2 articles offered an environmentally induced causation, and 2 others saw autism causation as biological. Jumping to the last decade that you're looking at here, the last one completed so far, that is, 719 of the 1,543 causes found, nearly 47%, come from the 1987 through 1996 span. Neurological causations alone number 270, with 176 genetic causes cited. This area of investigation moved ahead of psychological causations published, 116, for the first time in any decade. Only 47 environmental causations were offered, with the remaining 2 etiologies each accounting for about 8% of the decade's total as well. That is the 1987 to 1996 decade. Biological investigations numbered 52, while allergy and immunological studies accounted for 58 of the 719 causes addressed. As autism prevalence grows, information about it grows. I call it drinking from the autism information fire hose. Figuring out how to filter it in a way that works for you is the trick. The causes still haven't been confirmed, and even now, we can treat the symptoms sometimes, but there is no cure for autism or for ASD. I think the divergent etiologies are part of this lack of consensus, and that's why my wife and I do what we do. Hopefully, adding 1997 to the present, to these data, will help clarify what's going on in autism etiology research. That is, what has been going on and what's going on now. I also did by journal and by author breakouts back in the 1990s, but we'll just wait for the full listing, 1943 through 2023, hopefully, to see how these go over the years. The stats given are from my master's thesis in the mid-1990s. I cut it at the end of 1996 because the abstract translations to English take about 6 months to a year, and I was collecting the data from the end of 1995 through early 1998. But when I did a 1997-1998 update for a conference that I was doing in late 1998, already psychological dropped and immune started to grow. So I'm jazzed to see what we come up with after adding 21st century stats. Stay tuned. If you want to follow this on our free quarterly newsletter or our $24 a year monthly newsletter, email autisticfamily@yahoo.com. If you want to leave any comments below this YouTube presentation, please do. I intend to check in regularly and get back with commenters. Peace, Dr. J.